Whoa, campaign starting next week and you still don't have a clue what you're gonna do? Are your players bored of basic adventures set in knockoff Forgotten Realms, but you just can't think of anything else? Is your entire family concerned for your mental well-being and financial stability because you're stretching your life 6 different ways and they never see you anymore? Well, too bad. I'm a dungeon master, not a life coach, and this is how to homebrew campaign settings. So sit down, buckle up, and get ready to feel the music as we tackle how I craft entire worlds into motion and flush them out so that your players will be as immersed as possible in your future campaigns. I've run 3 full campaigns in my 3 years of playing. Most of that time was spent in Solara, so we're going to use that for the basis of my tutorial today. I've also run at least a dozen one-shots, but before I played regularly, I would run one-shots with my friends going back as far as 2010, using whatever books I could get my hands on. And with those illustrious qualifications out of the way, let's get started. First thing, don't do everything at the start. Just do what matters for your session 1. The rough history of the world, the rough map, and the local areas to where you begin just need a little bit of fleshing out, and you're good. Don't do what I did with my first game and write 300 pages for the entire continent and then later have to rewrite it 4 times as they obviously did things you didn't expect and didn't prepare for. We're going to do this in stages. The first is broad motions, ideas mostly, fluid brush strokes that just frame the game to be. After that will come rough maps and timelines, placing those ideas into a rough scope to be fleshed out more. After that comes trajectory planning, the stage where once you know the world and more or less what you want to have already happened, you need to start figuring out what you want to happen later to the players. What you want their big problem to be for the game. And then comes tidying and flushing out whatever was left behind from before. And lastly comes building the floor that your players will land on and start running. The inciting incident. So, world building. It begins with a single idea. For the idea that I'll be guiding you through today, I started with this. What would happen if every universe crossed over with every other? If every realm was able to merge together into one giant soup of chaos? And then I ran from there. I had to think of what ideas I wanted to implement, and what state I wanted the world to be in for the campaign to begin. So first, I thought of what ideas I wanted to have as a part of the game. First was portals. Lots of portals. I wanted this to be a proper realms game, and so I made plans for when I eventually had to map out the world to make another map that would overlay on top of it with dozens of portal locations. After portals, I wanted monsters. If this was going to be a weird game, it was going to be properly weird. And if all of these portals were open, something would eventually come through. Something from everywhere. Every plane of reality would be represented, and they would all show their stripes and colors in weird and wacky ways. After that, I had ideas for mutations, and evolutions based on long-term living in other realms, and species growing to adapt to their new homes. Then was when I began to start thinking of history, and of wars between the devils and angels on the material plane, of creatures from the Shadowfell and Feywild possessing and slaughtering mortals, and of dragons and titans roaming the land. Lastly, I thought of deities, and how they would be represented here. And I realized with all of these, I had one great plan forming. So with these rough ideas, I started to pencil them down. I wanted these portals to last. I said from the start, none could be made, and none could be torn down. Spells like Gate only make temporary rifts. No new permanent ones could be made. And when they tried to destroy them, they would release a violent burst of energy so strong it could break a continent apart. A fact that I wanted to be evident. And so I said here that I needed to make a small one or have it be fractured as a lesson they should heed for later. Another thing to note is that on a timeline scale, exploration is key. Make sure to incorporate the discovery of many major sites. Even if you don't know fully what they hold, if one sentence description of them is interesting enough, your players will want to know more, and they will want to investigate. Allow that opportunity to explore with them. So have lost lands, forgotten discoveries, and abandoned, monster-infested civilizations, because things like that draw players to explore the world and the setting that you're making right now. In my last game, the gods played a minor role. No more. This time they would walk the land in mortal bodies, existing among those who worship them. That way, they could be a relevant part of the story, and wow, did that make a major impact on the game and the characters within it. Everyone worshipped someone by the end, and it was through interactions, gifts, and respect, not just devout, blind prayer like in the normal games where only clerics and paladins get abilities. Everyone spoke with deities, and they didn't even all get things from them. It was just a mutual relationship. After portals and gods came war, to which I had there be many, and all of them had a purpose. When making your worlds, think of how each previous battle could hold a lesson. Some decisions can be won by not charging in. Others should be inserted simply to show why areas have been abandoned or why people are distrusting of outsiders. Wars are a great way to have history accelerate and crash. Look to the real world, to the advances conflicts have brought about, and to the destruction they leave in their wake. I had there be a few wars between the devils and men, establishing prior distrust in order to seed doubts that they were being forthright in the present. I had nations, realms in this case, ally with those of Solara against the devils. I also chose for there to be interpersonal conflicts on the material plane between the Massadus Empire, the place where the group was starting in, and the Drumseer Dynasty, the rulers of the other half of the continent. Because not everyone's gonna agree on everything, and it's very important to show that while yes, there is inter-realm conflicts, that does not bring everyone together. After war came planning the portal locations so that I could plan the monsters, and that's when I realized I needed a map. So with maps, it's best to start local. Think about the terrain you want to go for. I wanted a dark and stormy port, and so I looked at the European coastline and its topography and latitude for my reference. It was very hilly and jagged. It's perfect. From there I stretched down, and I started to make it less dark and stormy, and more bright and dry, until you reach a tropical area at the southern point. Then, going back north, and traveling west instead, we went from dark and stormy to cold and marshy, frozen swamps and tundras, and then I just filled inwards. I made lakes and rivers, and a heart where a dividing line for this divided country was a mountain range so tall the winds around it are nearly deafening, the howling peaks. I then roughed out the rest of the world. Basically, I just sort of worked on the same premise. I started with one location and just ebb and flowed terrain ideas and biomes around, making sure that you maintain logic. You go from a gradient of sorts. You start with a little bit of a desert, and then you go to a dry savanna. You never go from a desert to a rainforest, because this is not Minecraft. This is real life, where rainforests go to grasslands, go to deserts, that sort of thing. What's most important is that you make it detailed enough to riff on later, but not too detailed as to be hard to remember, describe, or insert a new character or idea into later. Flesh out your starting area, and then have it get more and more vague as you go out. Yes, you can have a world map, but leave yourself some freedom for later. After maps, I then made more maps. I started dotting portals all over the place with this rough overview, and I'm just throwing them all over. Certain places had more, and certain places were more likely to have certain portals. The continent of Prianus, where they started, had a larger variety, but a more spaced out scattering of them. That way they could go anywhere, but it would be a mission to get there. Fun exploration for low levels, or easy transport at higher ones. Now let's go even deeper. Our broad strokes are done. We know what terrain we want them to start in, and let's now figure out the specifics of where we want them to begin. A town square, a dungeon, a forest, a tavern, or a school. anything can be a starting location, but it has to work with the environment and the story that you're planning. In my game, the dark and stormy town of Black Rock Wharf, there was a tavern, and it saw many sea-weary travelers, and was known to be dicey. But only one person slept there, so it didn't matter, and they met later on in the inciting action. For real. For real, though, games can start where and however you want. I usually have them come together in a fight, like they're all in one inn or spread out across a town, and they hear an explosion and come together, and that's it. In most of these cases, for session 1, all you have to worry about is the first location, the dungeon, the town, the school, and everything else, every single one of them, can be bullet points or general ideas. They start more established the closer you get, and they get blurrier and blurrier as you zoom out on your map from the first location. Okay, so now you know where they're starting. It's all fleshed out. The map is fleshed out enough, anyways, and the starting location now just needs some love. Since we're not doing dungeons today, that's a future video, let's talk about how to build a town. First, what I like to do is to match the important businesses to the vibe of the town. If you're going for a gloomy port city, have your blacksmith be lit by only the fire of the forge, and stare forlornly at the sea. Have them tell the party a grizzled story of their past, if asked, and be hesitant to relinquish some favored weapon they made long ago. You can also have there be a general store that sees very little trade, and as such makes good deals from the seedy merchant behind the counter. But one thing I usually do is have there be one place that goes dramatically against the atmosphere, to create a better vision through the difference. You can have a bombastic innkeep, or a magic shop where the inside of it is larger than the outside, and it's glowing in neon, and everything is bright and beautiful. After the vibe, though, the rough plans are down, let's get on to what businesses a town should have, and then what it could have. Towns I make usually have at least one inn or tavern, a blacksmith, a general store, and then a temple of some sort. Of course, there could be multiple of these, or none. Those are just guidelines I like to bring in. And then some optional ones I could throw in could be a magic shop, either books, items, potions, or all the above, a town hall, a sheriff's office, or anything like that, a library, a brewery or 5, a flea market, a fancy alterations or tailor place, a jewelry store, or a hidden underground fighting ring underneath a church. Are also good ideas to bring into your games. Now that we've decided what we want to have in our starting town, let's go over how to write the basics for each of them. Inns or taverns or just hostels can be done very simply. Just 2 sentences. Rooms cost 1 gold per night, and the inn is run by a human named John, for instance. You can, of course, get more complicated, think of more interesting ideas. You can make food and drink menus, have NPCs be planned around the inside, toss on a quest board, or have the quest stumble in from the rain right in their laps. Blacksmiths can have a focus on weapons or armor, or just make everything in the book. It's up to you. They can be written out like, this shop is run by a female dwarf named Brumhilda, and she sells every weapon and armor in the player's handbook in common steel. You can make adjustments by allowing them to craft other materials like adamantine or mithril. You can make them specialize in one kind of equipment, meaning theirs is better, but they can't offer the party something they might be looking for. Other ideas could be that they're missing something that the party wants made, and so they have to do a quest to get it back, and they make the item for free or at a reduced price or something like that. You could have them in possession of something special, like a magic item, that they want to sell for a high price to a worthy customer. General stores after that are incredibly simple. The shop is run by a male named Blinky, and he sells everything in the player's handbook, discounting, no weapons. And that's it. Just like the blacksmith, you can think of one or several magic items you might often have tucked behind the counter. Usually potions of healing, bags of holding, or spell scrolls is usually where I stop with general stores. But you could, of course, change that. Temples can be basic, but I like to make them more complicated and separate to the religions. Think of not only the head priest, but also the other attendants. A temple of Tolona, for instance, may be a place infested with disease, where all the attendants wear plague masks, and they carry disease showing symptoms and yet do not die. Or you can have it be a sick ward or a hospital, or things like that. Magic shops are like general stores, but filled with the weird and wild. They can have flamboyant operators, mysterious objects that the party can buy without fully understanding what they do, only to figure them out later. Town halls usually have the head of the city, captain of the guard, and maybe a jail or inn or nearby them. They are usually not addressed in games, but think they may come up. Town halls, castles, palaces, If that's the kind of game you're running, you should consider who runs the town, the system of government they use, and the structures they use for their guard. Is it an empire? Is it a democracy? A monarchy? What is it? Libraries can range from the basics, fiction, nonfiction, and the like, to hidden, lost, containing forbidden knowledge, or sealed away, abandoned, or locked down to prevent whatever is still inside from escaping. Breweries are just fun places. Think of drinks that you could make, and then just have them be named and put them where they would be made somewhere in the world. Ales and meads have to come from somewhere. Flea markets can be a fun way to introduce later shopkeepers or NPCs from a town in a rapid fashion, to incite callbacks later on and get relationships going. Tailors, dressmakers, and jewelry shops should be introduced in bigger cities, perhaps before a large ball or gala that the party is going to. And the fighting ring thing, well, it may sound like a joke. I did it, and it was great. Have a charming announcer, a favored grand champion, an interesting arena, and most of all, worthwhile prizes. They'll come back if they like your combats, and they'll stay if they like winning. Now that you have your elements, look at the size of your town. Place them around. 2 inns here on Main Street, a blacksmith in the workers' district, cobblers over there, brewery, general store, and a market in the town square, and a temple on the docks. And there's your city. After the town is done, let's get on to what happens between towns. The gradual ebb and flow of terrain should be complemented in weather, wildlife, and weirdness. Roads and travel should be an opportunity for you to bring in the wild situations that you can think of and wouldn't make sense to focus on in a larger game. You could introduce haunted mansions, monster dens, mountain paths, treacherous terrain, wandering bandits, and grand landscapes. Every space on your map is miles of wide open world, just waiting for you to fill it. Think of the possibilities within every pixel, the worlds in front of you. No more 5-second and then you're there travels. Describe the world in vivid detail. Call for watches at night. Describe the sights, sounds, and smells of the wilds, the stars above, and love every moment as you watch your players' faces light up. And then you too have made it to the next destination. We have maps, timelines, starting locations, and now lastly, our big problem, the campaign settings doom. This does not need to be introduced in Session 1, or even by Session 50. I didn't reveal my hand until roughly Session 30 of Solara, and Matt Mercer, the madman he is, did not reveal the big threat of his second campaign until like Session 111. So really, have fun with the random and wild stories, and then drop the bomb that the world is going to end when you feel it's right. Campaign bosses need 3 things. They need a unique history tied to the setting. They need an interesting personality that meshes or bounce off the parties and players well. And they need a goal that is the antithesis of everything the players stand for. Tying a history should be the easiest of those 3, and it can be done before you ever speak with the players about their characters. If you want a world where every realm is connected, have the villain be from the Forgotten Realm, the one that was cut off and left to die, so they fought their way back to life and are going to tear everything down that was built to keep them locked away. The personality that works with the players is more interesting. Once you know about the player's vibe, hostile, mellow, money-hungry, information-hungry, work with that. For a party of hotheads, make a villain who is super casual and gets on their nerves. Make someone who can say, "Oh, you thought this was a fight. Dears, this is just a dance. One that I'm leading." Or if they're desperate for information, make the villain one who seeks to get that information first and use it against them. Or make a villain that's perfectly understandable, but their plan involves doing something horrible, with the ends justifying the means. Killing a planet to save a universe. Lastly, the villain's goal. It must be grand and worthwhile. It must be world-changing. They must want to dominate the continent, end the multiverse, or reveal and topple a government for its lies and spread anarchy throughout the world or the universe. They must be a threat worthy of a party of heroes coming together and stopping. And that is how I homebrew my campaign settings. I hope this was informative to at least one of you out there and help you make your worlds richer and your games more fun for you and your players. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to come around next week as we tackle how to homebrew quests. Have a good day, everyone.